Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Hello.
Good morning, colleagues.
Good morning, thank you. It is my great pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to all honourable ministers, ambassadors and secretary generals of national commissions, esteemed guests, colleagues and friends joining us both here at IIEP in Paris and online. We are here to celebrate 6 decades of IIEP, an institution which has shown a tireless dedication to advancing the cause of education worldwide. But we are not just here to celebrate the past. We will also look to the future of educational planning and management and consider new trends and perspectives from all across the field. My name is Rob. I am the Associate Editor here at IIEP, and I will be guiding you through these 2 days. Before we start, I'll just explain a few things about how today will work. Simultaneous interpretation is available in French, in English and Spanish. Those with us in Paris can get a headset from the table by the door where you came in. French interpretation is available on channel 5, English when you need it on channel 6, and Spanish on channel 7. Those of you following the event online can access interpretation by clicking the globe icon in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen and selecting your preferred language. All of the resources you see here today are available online, including the final agenda and the slides in all 3 languages. For those of you here in Paris, please use the QR code on the back of your badge. And for those of you joining us online, these are available via the chat. And just a word to our online audience, we are thrilled to have you with us today. Thank you for joining. There are dedicated members of the IIEP team here who will help you and keep you updated via the chat function. There'll be activities to take part in throughout the day, so please keep an eye out for these. And if you have any questions for the panelists, ask them directly in the chat and we will pass a selection of them to our moderators here in the room. Now we have a lot on the agenda, as you know, and session 1 is on making the case for educational planning in today's world. So without further ado, I will hand you over to the director of IIEP, Martín Benavides.
Bonjour.
Good morning.
Buenos días. Je suis très content et avec beaucoup de...
I'm really glad, and it's an immense privilege for me to welcome you today to the IIEP for the 60th anniversary of our institution dedicated to the future of planning.
Please use your headphones for this first part. I will be speaking French and then other languages. Okay. Je recommence.
I'm going to start all over again. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, we're waiting for the Assistant Director General for Education. She's coming. She had a last-minute meeting, but she's going to be here anytime. So I was saying that it's indeed an honor and a privilege to me to welcome you today to the IIEP for the 60th anniversary celebrations of our institution. Now, this symposium that's going to last 2 days is going to be full of interesting discussions. There are 30 speakers coming from all over the world and who've actually come physically to our institute. Amongst them, we have several prime ministers of ministers of education, secretary of states, heads of planning units, ambassadors, general secretaries from the UNESCO Commission, and intellectual figures in the field of planning, former directors, former deputy directors as well. And thank you, everybody, for coming here. Thank you as well to all the IIEP staff that has gathered in this room and virtually. And that comprises the former trainees of this institute who are working all over the world. More than 3,000 have actually enrolled for this event and are online. And this is indeed a testimony of their commitment. While I've just borne office as the director, it comes upon me to tell you that this is a unique moment to bring together a whole family of IIEP, all the planners of education who basically have been, who have availed themselves of the planning training for more than 60 years in order to make changes in the planning and the field of education and to help us further our mission. These 2 days are indeed a celebration, but will be also focusing on the future. We will try together to think about the new challenges and the solutions that we must bring thanks to discussions amongst us, the stakeholders. We have representatives from all countries here, from the highest levels, who'll be talking about their national experiences. I am thrilled about this discussion that shall ensue, and I really would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your presence and your participation. To inaugurate the symposium, I would be glad to welcome the Assistant Director General for Education, and I'd like to thank her again for having taken the time to participate in this week of the General Conference of UNESCO. I also would like to greet the French ambassador to UNESCO, as well as the Secretary General of the French Republic to UNESCO. Again, this is a testimony of France's commitment to our institute. Last but not the least, I'm also pleased to welcome Sarah Ruto, who is a member of the governing board and who has been with us
in this seminar.
Now, I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Ambassador for the inauguration, and then we will call the others onto the stage.
Bonjour à tous, buenos dias.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to speak in French.
Mesdames et messieurs les ministres,
Distinguished Minister, Mr. Director of the Institute, Estimado Martin, Deputy Director General for Education, dear Stefania. Great timing. I think this was exactly the way it was planned in my speech. Mr. Secretary General of the French National Commission for UNESCO, dear Alexander, dear Mrs. Sarah Ruto-Ebbs, Excellencies, colleagues, as soon as I took over as head of the permanent delegation of France a few months ago, in the month of May, I came to the IIEP to talk to the new director and his team about the close partnership that's ongoing with France, and that's also going to continue in the future. I'm therefore particularly pleased to be able to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Institute with you and to kick off this 2-day symposium held alongside the 42nd General Conference. And then there's going to be the Donors' Day, of course. I'm going to let you in on a secret without revealing my age, of course. I did not celebrate my own 60th birthday. and I'm here for the Institute. Now, this just goes to show the interest I take in IIP and how much France takes to this Category 1 institute in Paris. The fact that so many ministers of education and high-level officials from different countries are taking part in this country clearly shows the importance of IIP's mission and role for the international community on the occasion of its 60th anniversary. This is a great recognition for the Institute, and I really would like to commend this achievement on behalf of France. This is also an opportunity for me to pay tribute to a French lady who spent most of her career working to support the activities of the IIP. I'm sure you know her. It's Mrs. Michelle Delegue, who is unable to be here for health reasons and age. She has worked within the French National Commission for UNESCO for 50 years to organize study visits for IIEP trainees, and thus has made it possible to present the French education model to education professionals from all over the world. This two-day symposium affords you the opportunity to discuss the main thematic priorities of the Institute's work against the backdrop of the challenges facing education in today's world. It's a huge challenge, a sizable one. I am delighted that each of the panelists will bring together the heads of IIEP officers, political figures in the field of education, representatives of academia and NGOs. This whole spectrum of points of view will help to illustrate the IIP's action in the field, its beneficial effects in partner, and to outline prospects for its future mission. As you know, France has been very closely involved with the IIP since its inception and has always supported it ever since. The French government supported the creation of the IIP in 1963 alongside the World Bank and the Ford Foundation. It provided the IIP with offices in a specially constructed building. And from 1969 to 1998, the IIEP had 4 French directors. Now, for the past 2 decades, France's partnership with the IIP has focused in particular on the development of education policies in Africa, mainly through the Institute's office in Dakar. Now, this is a priority which France really holds close to its heart. Now, thanks to this cooperation, 25 ministers of education in Africa have received direct support, and 500 experts have been trained in education sector analysis. Since 2019, France has made a twofold commitment to the IIP, first through its partnership with the AFD, the French Development Agency, by way of a framework agreement worth $10 million American over 4 years and several programs, quality steering, vocational training, expertise platform, as well as through voluntary contributions, 1.2 million euros in 2020, 1.5 million in 2021, and 1.9 in 2022, and 3 million in 2023. Which basically contributes to its core funding, I'm saying it in English, and also to the financing of the Gender at the Center initiative launched by France in 2019 as part of its G7 presidency. France has thus become its major contributor, providing around a quarter of its annual budget over the past 5 years. And I'm going to tell you there is no better investment for us, and we are extremely satisfied with the results of these 60 years. And we wish the IIP a very long life, and long live the partnership between the IIP and France. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Alexander Navarro, the Secretary General of the French National Commission to UNESCO, to come on. Madam Deputy Director General, Ministers and Secretaries of State, Mr. Director of the IIEP, ladies and gentlemen, directors, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the immense honor made to the French National Commission for UNESCO for inaugurating this 60th anniversary over the past 6 decades. And we can say that the Institute has been a beacon of excellence in the field of education, providing vital support to countries all over the world in their quest to improve and transform their educational systems. This anniversary marks more than just a commemoration in a linear history. It's in fact a milestone in an exceptional journey marked by commitment, innovation, and perseverance, along with several stakeholders. And there's also this determination and creativity to provide solutions to rise up to the challenges. The IIEP, in fact, is a discrete institution and is not making the headlines, but is an institute that's working behind the scenes. It is an institute that has built a better world brick by brick for future generations, and these generations will have to rise up to the challenges, the demographic changes that are heralding cohorts of millions of new pupils and students in the youngest countries will force you to devise new ways of offering them equitable access. Crisis, population shifts, climate change also will place an overwhelming responsibility on you for those who have to design resilient and sustainable educational environments. And it has taken us centuries to understand that the empowerment of women and girls is the cornerstone to social progress, and we hope that we can move faster to make empowerment through knowledge a reality. Finally, the power of digital technology to transform education is also marked by several challenges that you have to anticipate. We say that at the French National Commission for UNESCO, we're the intermediary, the conduit, the in-between. We're the ferryman between two shores. We've got UNESCO on at an institution with its values, its objectives, but also its bureaucracy and operating rules. On the other, we've got a moving galaxy of ministers, associations, foundations, individuals and schools that are seeking to participate in the same adventure of liberation, of freedom through knowledge and culture. Our role is at the National Commission is twofold. We've got to disseminate the values and missions of the organization to all our contacts and make people understand, and also supervise, organize all the initiatives to enrich the work of the organization. As far as IIEP is concerned, we have always been convinced that we have an additional mission to accomplish because we are the National Commission of the host country and we welcome this opportunity. That's why in the past we've done as much as we could to help the IIEP in its mission. And we think it's our responsibility to put all this at the service of the Institute. We have organized trips across France and neighboring countries to help trainees discover examples of educational planning policies, to meet the people who implemented them, to exchange ideas with them. And keeping in mind with the spirit of UNESCO, we are convinced that by building such bridges between cultures, by sharing methods, by learning from each other, we can improve humanity. Today, these journeys are perhaps a thing of the past. The COVID-19 pandemic has also forced us to adopt new education technologies, but we're all actually here to write the future, the story of the future. We have to lay the foundations of this modern society today. We are celebrating the success of the past and we're looking at the future with optimism and resolution. We have challenges and our resolution to be with you is even more sizable. We would have actually prepared a roadmap, and this is going to be a roadmap that will definitely take into account the diversity, gender equality, and also will prepare the future generations. And if you give us the honor to support you in this, I think the destination will be redefined and we always will be extremely proud. Thank you so much for having invited us for this symposium for the 60th anniversary. Thank you so much for everything you're doing to transform the world of education. And I'd like to wish you all a very happy 60th anniversary. Now, I've got the pleasure to welcome the Assistant Director General of UNESCO, Stephanie Giannini. And thank you so much for having come. She is going to speak in English, so she's going to make a speech both in English and French, parts of it in English, parts of it in French.
Excellencies, dear ministers, dear ambassador, dear director, thank you so much for inviting me to join you in this important celebration of the 60th anniversary. I'm so glad to join you to celebrate such an important milestone time for this milestone institute. And this year, as you know, possibly marks two different anniversaries for IIEP, the 60th anniversary here in Paris from the establishment of the institute and the 25th anniversary of the regional office in Buenos Aires that we actually just celebrated in July this year. So on this day, I find myself reflecting on the reason that the IIEP was created in the first place in 1963. And I wish to share a few reflections on that. The training, while the core mission of the IIEP remains as relevant as ever, its initial purpose was to advise European countries in the post-war decades, as well as to provide policy and planning advice to recently independent member states in the post-colonial era. The World Bank, the French government, and the Ford Foundation supported the initiative as the very first foundational and financial partners. Designing policies and new methodologies in education with the long-term perspective, including research on the rapid ongoing changes through the booming decade. I come from that decade, by the way, I was born. So I joined the ambassador in such a personal confession today. And training our policymakers from developing countries was immediately identified as a strategic asset to address the big challenges of that time: demography, technology, and energy, as well as the role of developing countries on the global scene, were already included in the list by Senator Kennedy in his memorable speech that possibly you have in mind. The training, policy advice, and knowledge sharing that the IIEP provided to the governments of those countries at that time helped to shape their educational systems for decades to come. We have a lot to reflect, of course, on many achievements to celebrate on this day. But we must also recognize that today, in 2023, we are at yet another critical moment at history. This moment was launched in earnest at the Transforming Education Summit last year, as many of you know, and participated also actively to this process. At the TESS Summit, we agreed to embark on a momentous journey to rethink our relationship as humans to the planet, to technology, and to each other, as the UNESCO Futures of Education report just called the international community to do. I see here Professor Reimers was one of the active members of the committee. Well, it requires that we move from the logic of reforming, which is a very kind of ministerial syndrome I experienced in my career life as well, to the culture of transformation. And this is a big change because it's a kind of a cultural change. Member states agreed on this transformative approach and pledged to work together to place the climate, inclusion, and equity at the heart of learning, and to transform education because education is the key to unlocking sustainable development. Well, planning, which is the role of planning and management in this picture? To cut it short, a long story, and then I'm preaching the converted and I'm speaking to real experts, I wish to go straight to the point from my perspective. Planning and management in education do represent the backbone of public policies. They are as invisible as they are indispensable to implementing education policies and plans to efficiently and effectively reach both national and international goals. UNESCO member states rely on IIEP for playing this role of being the reference point, the international institution which can guide them in this journey. By building the capacities of generations of educational planners around the world, IIEP has largely contributed to the design of sound education sector plans reflecting country needs and priorities, while at the same time building the necessary capacities to effectively implement and monitor those plans and bridging those plans to the international and global debate, which is not, as we know, an easy task. Through this research, thousands of publications, I'm not going to detail here, training, a rich, I would say, unique network of alumni, and we know which is the power of alumni. I think this institute is really now becoming a very unique institution. And some of these former trainee of this institute are here today, including Minister of Education from Seychelles, the former Minister of Tibet from Madagascar, as well as the heads of planning from Burkina Faso, Cambodia, Guyana, St. Kitts and Nevis, among others. And I wish to warmly thank all of them for coming and being still, part of the supporters club of the Institute. Well, you are, let me say, to conclude, the architects of education. It's a kind of, designing and shaping the guidelines in order to make education systems to change in concrete terms through a concrete action plan. And this is about infusing our education system with resilience, accountability, transparency, equity, quality, innovation, and relevance through robust, solid plans and policies. Well, mesdames et messieurs.
Ladies and gentlemen, in this context, the IIEP's 6 thematic priorities, that is learning, technology, equity, transparency, resilience, and skills for the future, in fact, defining missions, are essential to achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and in particular for the Sustainable Development Goals. This agenda, we know about this agenda. We've been speaking about this during the General Conference. It's being held, in fact, in UNESCO this week. And this is basically vital because thousands of girls, boys, and teenagers are still having incredible difficulties to acquire basic skills. These are skills that are basically the foundations to the rest. It's the foundations to their life, their career, their professional pathways and growth as a human being. These 6 thematic priorities will structure your dialogue over the next 2 days, reflecting on and learning from the past. And this is why I've tried to see with you the spirit of this institution, And we've got 60 years ago. And also we've got to look at the future of educational planning while taking into account the latest trends and perspectives. And I think to really conclude my remarks, the notion of transformation, of change, it's not about just reforming public systems through new legislation. When you are part of a new government, we've got basically the ambition to sign a legislation bearing your name. I've done the same thing. It's important because legislation is basically the starting point to implement active policies. And if there is no radical change, cultural models, policy models cannot change, and there will be no real change, and we really need real change. So I'd like to I completely agree with Mr. Ambassador, and I would like to wish IIEP 60 years of further 60 years of productive work, which is extremely important for the international community. Thank you so much and happy anniversary.
Thank you very much. Now, I would like to welcome Sarah Ruto, who is member of our governing board. Please, Sarah.
I'd like to stand on the protocol that has been set. The Ambassador Director General, you can see I'm very poor at naming. So let me just say, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. For those of you who have traveled from far, from near, those of you who are listening to us online, it is truly, truly a pleasure to be here with you this morning. I recognize that history has been very kind to us at this particular moment, because we stand on the shoulders of many whose efforts have allowed us to be here at this moment, 6 decades down the road, to celebrate. And therefore, on behalf of the governing board, in which I'm a member, I congratulate all of you, participants, representatives of governments, ministries of education, both past and present, all the partners, governments who have given their support, as Ambassador has stated here, friends, leadership, and the staff who sit in Buenos Aires, Dakar, and here in Paris, for your varied involvement in IEP that has allowed us to remain true to the fidelity of our mission. And we carry the mission in our name, the International Institute for Educational Planning. We therefore welcome you to this 2-day symposium to celebrate planning. Yes, I know planning is not does not conjure any excitement. When you think about planning, it is it's not the most sexy word around, we agree. But we also agree that when you have a plan, the chances of you succeeding are much higher. Therefore, we have to plan so as to we can get to that desired end that we want. I recognize that this is the year that we are also marking 75 years of the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights. And it therefore seems right that as we celebrate our 60 years of being as IEP, we need to reflect if we have remained true to the foundational spirit of why we are and why we have come to be. And Article 26 of the UN Declaration states that everyone has a right to education, and that this education should allow the full development of the person and should promote friendship amongst all nations, amongst other things. So when I look back at IEP and what we have done and our 60 years, I think we have played our role to realize this particular right to education. For example, In the year that has just concluded, 2022-23, IEP joined hands with 19 countries, 19 ministries of education for the education sector analysis and planning. Indeed, over the last 60 years, IEP has trained over 24,000 people in 183 countries, and that's about 95% of the UNESCO member states. We have nearly 2,000 publications. You know, these are nice, staggering statistics, and it is good to celebrate. But yet at the same time, we have to recognize that some children still remain outside of this promise to the right to education in its fullness. To be responsive, IEP has invested in diverse planning techniques. So we have now gender responsive planning so that we can assure both girls and boys in their varied contexts, addressing the intersectionality of the layers of disadvantage that leave them out, that we address them. So gender responsive planning is there, integrity planning so that we bring in the accountability, sensitive planning to allow us to be responsive to crisis. All these are ways in which IEP has tried to adapt to the various crises and needs of the countries, of the nation countries. And I think that this adaptability is critical for us because until all receive this right to education, then we cannot sit on our laurels. We must therefore continue to introspect, continue to reflect, continue to adapt our planning. And in the spirit of Ubuntu, where I come from, we say, I am because we are. So until all of us are, I cannot truly be. And so I'd like to, on this spirit of Ubuntu, that we cannot rest until all of us, actualize this right to education that will allow us to explode. I therefore look forward to the divergent views all of you are going to bring in these 2 days of celebration. Let us celebrate, but also reflect on what else we need to do. Please do feel free to affirm the mission. If we are doing well, you don't change if it's not broken. But if there is something else that needs to be done, let us critique, let us agree, let us disagree. Most important, let us listen to each other, seek to understand, and collectively work to this collective future where we know that because of sound educational planning, we are definitely assuring an educational right to all. Planning is a route, is a journey, and the journey is this child. And if this child is not yet being, then we still have our job cut for us. So I end by saying, karibuni sana. Welcome all, and let us enjoy this moment. If this was at home in Africa, I would have told you, let us stand and do a jig, but maybe some of you might wonder what I'm doing. So I will respect that I am in France because had the ambassador danced and sang a little bit, I would have joined in. But since he did not, I will just say welcome all. Thank you very much.
Okay, now it's better. Well, thank you again. And this is becoming very dynamic on languages. And I think it's good. It's a demonstration of our effort to integrate. So I'm gonna complicate more things. I'm gonna speak not only in English, then in French, and then in Spanish, for my colleagues. Next. On the next celebration, and but we are also trying to learn other languages, of course. Okay, let me begin with the technical discussions of this anniversary. I have the responsibility of setting the scene of planning. So the topic of this symposium is the future of educational planning. But before we launch ourselves into the future, I want us to take a moment to look back. And I would like to set the scene by reflecting briefly on how educational planning has appeared in the academic discussion over the years to draw clues what lies next. Let's start by highlighting two characteristics of the production of academic publications on this topic. The first is that this production has not been constant over time. If we investigate academic literature on educational planning over the last 60 years and analyze what percentage of publication produced explicitly and centrally touch on educational planning, we find that there is a peak in the 70s, and then a very accentuated sharp drop and a small recovery in recent decades. This peak of the 70s, according to authors and different authors such as Satya and Rast, is linked to a period where educational planning emerged as a major activity because it became increasingly relevant to the economic link between education and development and the importance of economic and social factors. It was during this period that the IIEP emerged as one of the main actors in the advancement of educational planning. After this peak and towards the end of the 80s, there was a major decline in the state's provision of education, and other stakeholders different from the states began to emerge. When the state is no longer the sole provider of educational services, the design and implementation of educational policies also depend on other actors. This, blended with ideologies that supported a stronger role of markets and a limited role of states, may have caused a decline in the relevance of educational planning as a subject of policies and then academic concern. This brought, therefore, a fall in the production of related literature. The central role of educational planning has started to recover since the 2000s, although not to the level of this former peak. It appears mainly in relation to international agreements and the need to support countries in complying with them, as said by former Deputy Director Françoise Caillot. She's here in our, please, Françoise, hello. Okay. She also pointed out how to the emergence of major international studies, such as OECD Program for International Student Assessment, PISA, or the IEA Progress for International Reading Literacy Study, were important in this process. This was the fundamental moment where, in Caillou words, planning processes stopped being centrally designed to become more participatory, more flexible, less technocratic, and more diverse. At the same time, planning started to incorporate still timidly monitoring and evaluation processes. This occurrence changed a previous tradition that was in most cases only linked to planning design. The second important thing to note regarding the academic discussion of educational planning is that despite the transformation just mentioned, we can still find a disconnect between ideas and discussion on educational planning and those related to the changes at the school level. In other words, the academic discussion on educational planning has been focused on procedural aspects and definitions, rather on their impact on specific issues related to the provision of education at the school level. It has been centered on questions such as whether to have a more quantitative than qualitative approach, whether processes should be bottom-up or top-down, whether planning is the monopoly of one ministry or one unit in one ministry or several, whether it should be goal-free or not. And finally, whether it should be based on a single plan or more diversified into several plans, among other kind of discussions. This gap between the discussion of planning and the educational transformation agenda is not only a theme of the present, but a characteristic that has persisted through the past 60 years. It was already identified in a book published by IIEP in 1978 by Adams, with 2 articles, with 2 contributions from 2 former IIEP directors, such as Hans Weiler and Jacques Halak. The name of the book is Educational Planning Towards a Qualitative Perspective. This is also reflected in the fact that if one analyzes the main comparative educational journals over the past 60 years, the presence of articles that explicitly touch on issues of educational planning in relation to substantive quality issues is minor. As an example, if only taking an example of one journal, such as the Comparative Education Review, we find that in the 60s, in all the decade of the 60s, 2 papers were related to educational planning. In all the 70s, 12, in the all the 80s, 6, all the 90s, 8, in 2001, and in the last decade, 0. What does this show? What does this show, and why it is critical for us in this moment as we reflect on the future of planning? I think that despite all the important recent development that have allowed the field of educational planning to find a legitimate space again, a major challenge remains: how to link it more clearly to issues related directly to school transformation. This is a demand that we have also found from our alumni and stakeholders, who play a critical role in the agenda setting for the sector and who are consistently underscoring its relevance. With the precise role of educational planning might have been debated over the years, the importance of educational planning is not in dispute for those who are on the implementation side. This recognition is especially evident among our alumni. Between May and June of this year, we asked alumni who have participated in our long-term training program to fill in a survey, which provided a window into their perspective on the role and evolution of educational planning. These alumni shared their belief, of which the majority work for a ministry, 74%. The sample had a large representation from Africa, 45%, and Latin American countries with almost 30% regions. We found that almost 90% of respondents from national ministries of education thought it extremely or very important to have an education sector plan to help their country to achieve SDG 4, which point at the perceived importance of traditional policy instrument for success. However, at the same time, respondents were also very sensitive to the appearance of phenomena that are likely to change the way educational planning operates within coming years or decades. They cite data and digital tools, artificial intelligence, health crisis and pandemics as the 3 most likely. Conflict and crisis, climate change and natural disaster, and the need for lifelong learning follow as another priority. We can then hardly ignore that these are issues that have filled the headlines in recent months and years, which point to an awareness of how planning needs to be reactive to emerging needs. Finally, participants share their belief of what they think educational planning will look 60 years from now. It was suggested that planning will play a larger role in the field of education, shaped by technology, data, and artificial intelligence. That it will be more participatory and involve more stakeholders, that it will be more evidence-based, and they will have a stronger focus on specific domains such as vocational skills, lifelong learning, equality, and green transformation. These insights are also consistent with a needs assessment recently conducted by our Office for Latin America and the Caribbean in Buenos Aires. Respondents from Ministry of Education and other government agencies were requested to rate priority items in the agenda to be addressed by their institution in the medium term. They identify educational planning and management as the first, followed by innovation in pedagogical practice, and then the third most prioritized topic is learning improvement and recovery. Against this backdrop, I want to emphasize that our more foremost challenge in educational planning is how to link the general macro planning issue with a specific substantive issue directly related to the educational experience. In the word of former Costa Rican Minister of Education, we have here the Ministry of Education of Costa Rica in this moment also, Leonardo Garnier. He said, if a reform does not reach the classroom, it does not exist. But how do we strike a balance with an effective systemic approach and addressing the substantive needs linked to key issues in the educational agenda? In other words, how do we reconcile the future of educational system, not only from the point of view of quantitative quantitative inputs and outputs, but also in terms of educational systems, content, and effects. Recognizing this our fundamental challenge, we have identified 6 priorities that tackle substantive aspects of educational planning. Digital technologies to transform education, gender and equity in education, crisis, displacements, and climate change, planning and management to improve learning, governance, transparency, and finance, and finally, skills for the future. These priorities are the topics of the panels we will be addressing during the following 2 days. We will take stock, hear national experiences and testimonies, debate perspective, and discuss the future of each one. Allow me now to change to French and take a glass of water. Permettez-moi de conclure en évoquant 3 points.
Just allow me to conclude by saying 4 final points, mentioning 4 final points regarding the future of planning. The first thing is that planning is not only for planners. In the field of educational planning, we usually focus on the planner, men and women, their tasks and their needs because of the structural role government officials play in the policy-making process. However, assuming that discussions on educational planning should only address them makes for an extremely narrow target audience. It is therefore obvious that planners are not the only ones to be involved in the process of policy design and implementation. However, the exact role played by other stakeholders in the educational community tend to be less evident. Therefore, it is necessary for educational system to rethink the political economy of these planning and implementation processes. Secondly, evidence is key, but so is a strong vision. Evidence by itself is not sufficient. At the IIEP, we are strong proponents of evidence uptake to benefit decision-making, but we need to push this further and say that evidence is necessary, but not a sufficient condition for policy-making. Evidence is usually not conclusive because the information we have is limited, and they're also subject to interpretation and might support the conflicting positions or contradictory paths of actions. As Walter Mondale said in 1971, and Auto Granado's former Secretary of Education of Mexico, in a book published by Fernando Raimes, who is with us, he said that for each study, statistical or theoretical, that contains a proposed solution or recommendation, there is always another equally well documented, challenging the assumptions and conclusions of the first one. Otto Granado concurs with that. You have to learn, listen, analyze, compare evidence, and review data. But in the end, just don't forget that the prevailing rationality is politics. Politics and not policy is what matters to achieve your goals. So therefore, trust your own common sense, said Auto Granado in his book. This is also what Lupton and Deborah Hayes have noted in their publication, Great Mistakes in Education Policy and How to Avoid Them in the Future, where they highlight the importance of recognizing that there is not a single proven approach to improve practice. The commitment of educators to working together to modify and contextualize good ideas based on local conditions is more important. It is the bringing together these conditions rather more than the prescriptions of specific methods and approaches adopted, which may likely contribute to the improvement of the quality of education, according to Lupton and Deborah Hayes. In addition, evidence is most powerful when it can be embedded in a strong framework. So therefore, it is important to have a clear and shared vision of the objectives we want to attain through education to make a decision that is evidence-based. Collectively agreeing on that vision is a complex moment of deliberation for any country or territory, but it is nevertheless the cornerstone of effective planning. Third, it is about thinking long-term without overlooking the short-term. Another important issue is the relationship between short and long-term perspectives. Generally speaking, planning processes are oriented towards the long term, a key quality that must be protected and promoted because successful reforms are long-term processes. Processes can originate in one time and may be implemented many years later, sometimes in the least expected moments if there is a window of opportunity. Therefore, it is critical to open the planning process to more actors and reach long-term agreements that involve more than governance only. And this is what some call the new social contracts for education. This process is not easy. It was not in the 60s when Philippe Combes, the first IIEP director, highlighted the flagrant need for the various actors of non-formal education to form themselves, and I will quote what he said, into a cooperative and well-coordinated community with a common purpose. It is even less so, I have finished the quote, it is even less so now when there are more interests at stake in education. This process implies a lot of political work, and it is political in the sense that you need to convince stakeholders to seek for alliances and to be extremely strategic in mobilizing a transformation agenda. This being said, we must also keep in mind that in a context of emergency and permanent change, like the one we are just living right now, one of the most complex activities for planners and decision makers is to plan for the future, the next day. Ministers and other decision makers do not necessarily have the luxury of waiting decades to foster change and show results. The link between humanitarian and development nexus needs to be clear in their work, and they need to address immediate concerns while achieving and meeting long-term goals to strengthen their political position and even to boost people's morale. If we consider planning as an activity which is also a short-term activity, the focus must be on implementation and finding a way to connect emergencies and desired long-term outcomes. I will now speak Spanish. And finally, I just wanted to say that IIEP is establishing new priorities, broadening its beneficiaries, innovating new evidence, and taking into account the concerns of all education institutions, and innovating and at the same time helping to create shared visions between different actors. Right now, it is that the support of the countries exists, but at the beginning of the planning cycle, it exists mainly through very important ESA analysis and the preparation of education sector planning. Our institution has intervened to a lesser extent in the later stages of planning and management processes, including translating strategic plans into operational plans, monitoring and evaluating such plans. But nevertheless, the process started a few years ago, but I believe that we are getting closer and closer to our objective, facing one of the biggest challenges we have faced, i.e. through our systemic position, we have to develop concrete experiences to transform our education systems. And we have to really focus on policy priorities as we did with our projects and right now. I believe that thanks to the work of our predecessors, but also thanks to to our innovations, the IIEP is well prepared and therefore well motivated to continue and support the member states and improve and help the member states to improve their education systems.
Well, we're gonna now pass to the next.
Bien, nous allons passer maintenant au panel suivant avec les ministres et les secrétaires chargés de la planification.
I will stay here for one more moment and invite Her Excellency and Catherine Muller, Minister of Public Education of Costa Rica. Ministra Miller, por favor. His Excellencies Justin Davis Valentin, Minister for Education of Seychelles, former IIEP alumni. Please, Minister. Her Excellencies Awood Den Akul from Nairobi. She's gonna be from Nairobi. She's the Minister of Education of General Education and Instruction for South Sudan. Is connected. Thank you very much, Her Excellency. And finally, His Excellency Romy Secretary of State of the Minister of Education of Youth, Sport in Cambodia. So I'm gonna be moderating this session with you, ministers. As our symposium is dealing with the future of educational planning, we wanted to open our discussion by this ministerial panel on making the case for educational planning on today's world. As I mentioned in the surveys of former IIEP alumni from our 3 offices that we carry out before, 89%, all the category included, not only Ministry of Education representatives, but also other ministries, development partners, civil society organization, responded that they have an educational sectoral plan in their country, with a small proportion in the Latin American region compared to other regions. Almost 90% of them, again, all categories included, consider the educational sector plans as extremely or very important, thus reaffirming the importance of planning approaches in development education world. In this context, we wanted to ask our distinguished speaker that represent all the highest levels of education making in the respective countries to provide us with the main arguments in favor of educational planning, refer to the main changes observed in the way educational planning has been designed and practiced over the past decades in the respective country, reflect with them on the way forward. So we will begin by Her Excellency Catherine Muller, Minister of Public Education from Costa Rica. Please, Ministra.
¿Hablo en español? You speak in English, Spanish?
Como prefiera.
Bueno, hacerlo en español.
Perfecto. ¿Quieres estar ahí o puedes también como que prefiera? No, como prefiera, como prefiera.
So I will speak in Spanish. I can change to English anytime, but go ahead. Bueno, creo que tal vez para mí personalmente he vivido un proceso de planificación ideal.
I believe personally that I went through an ideal planning process. I spent 15 years in UNESCO. I learned a lot, including with IIPE, where I work as well. And currently, I can implement all of this because I'm the Minister of Education of Costa Rica. So I can contribute to my country a lot of what I learned during those years. Now, to begin with, I had to start a planning process which initially set up a roadmap for education. Now, that roadmap, what was my approach to that roadmap? It dealt with routines and with issues so that we can set up routines. So those issues that don't belong to routine are those that are close to us and that set up create difficulties when we want to implement planning. Now, to begin with, we analyzed all of the major elements, such as the national plan. And I knew my president during a hiring interview. And all of the ministers were hired to do this work. Our president came from elsewhere. We don't belong to political parties. We don't do this for political reasons. And so we have a real courage to set up systems and to initiate anything, a lot of things. We don't owe anything to anyone. And so we set up a revision of the principles and guidelines stemming from international experiments. We have routine commitment by our country. We have an internal check system within our countries. And building on this, we started analyzing the goals set up by the roadmap, the final goals. So we set up surveys, polls. We interrogated young people below 18 and over 18, and then we set up workshops with various groups such as churches, civil society, and other associations. With the indigenous people, we set up various workshops and seminars. And at the end, we set up new guidelines to set up a new system to arrive at responsible citizens full of solidarity and people who have skills for life. Since most children and teenagers don't have lifelong skills, they can't cook, they can't drive, they can't do parenting. We thought it was necessary to have skills for real life, and then skills for work life, for business life. So that's the sort of citizens that we had on our mind. And so we set up a roadmap to guide our action in terms of how to manage this work. We included a program, methodology, and training of teachers. On the what, we set up all that relates to connectivity, transportation. And in how to manage, we include issues such as what was referred to by Mathilde, the use of data, decision-making. We don't have a database in most countries. So it's not that easy to know where we headed. Here, we set up all that relates to governance, the strategy, legal reforms, procedures, and all those issues where we can set up claims along a process and under a one-shop system. We want to be more dynamic, and we want to have more transparency in the process. Controls, checks, alliances, especially alliances with the private sector, since our government is quite open to those alliances. We believe that the public sector cannot face up to all issues. So that's why we launched a program of education directed to local communities that are interested in those issues. Now, first, how do we go about this? We thought, what should we recover in terms of learning? How do we know what we should recover. So first, we set up a comprehensive assessment set up by teachers, implemented by teachers, and it included all pupils. And then we set up recovery schemes depending on what we expect, the profiles that we expect for students, so that we can recover those people. There's one thing hanging on my mind. After the pandemic, we thought students should go back to classrooms. But I believe that we neglected a process that we should be more careful about. It is the social and emotional recovery, the fact that you happen to be back to school, and a lot of students have incorporated that stress to stay at home, not to be able to touch people, not to be able to be with their family, not to be able to go out. So they absorbed all that stress, and then we asked them to play with each other without touching each other, but with sharing. And so it means a totally different approach, especially and also for teachers who suffered a lot during the pandemic. They didn't have the opportunity to have those technologies and techniques to manage classroom conflicts. So this brought about a change in the behavior of people. More intolerance, people are less able to have interpersonal contacts. I believe that we should work on all this and provide more tools to teachers so that they can deal with this. Second point, the issue of writing and reading and mathematics and logical thinking. Why? Because, as was said, students at 10 cannot write. Pupils cannot write. Even when they come to secondary school, some of them cannot write. So that's why we are doing some intensive work at all levels on reading and writing. And then we need standardized tests as recommended by the UN at the end of the primary school and secondary school. Now, we were concerned, I'm very concerned, because pupils fear tests. Tests should be something pleasant. It is a tool for self-improvement, and pupils should see that tool as something which enables them to locate themselves on the way, on the path. So we have to tell them about diagnosis at the beginning of the year so that they can see the change at the end of the year. And all of that should not be memorized, but should be done in terms of problem solving. So all of these tests should be digitalized. Pupils have done all of this, and with access to internet, we also have a hybrid educational policy. We believe that we should go back to books. Why? Because in times of crises, we have to find our way back to the basics of education. Also, professional orientation is doing fairly well in our countries. We also have a program for adults that couldn't complete their secondary schooling. We have a problem of certification, but also we help them prepare their resume. We help them use digital tools. That was very successful. We also made up an inventory of educational resources. We have to know resources and infrastructure. It is up to the states to plan all this. And also we have to work in terms of standing teams. We must understand why pupils drop out. And then we have to understand the background to complex situations, drug traffic, and so on. Finally, we made a change on international cooperation. We don't wait for international cooperation to come up with proposals. We invite local international volunteers, and we tell them where we want them to go. And I would like to thank them for their support. We would like to ask them what we can do together. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, ministra. Now, I will invite His Excellency Justin Valentin, Minister of Education from Seychelles.
Well, it's here or there. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Well, I was given a brief to speak about the theme, making a case for education, planning. I was given 5 questions to answer. I don't know whether people have the questions so that I can put you into the picture. The question that I was given provide an argument about the case of education, contextualize that in the case of Seychelles, show some challenges, and then of course, the way forward. So I've wrapped up my argument, my discussions around these questions. So let me perhaps begin my argument by defining educational planning. So in my own words, it relates to the process of using logics, common sense, and to a larger extent, evidence to decide on programs or initiatives which will bring about positive results. So the ultimate idea is to advance policies, stimulate reforms, and of course, instigate worthwhile change. So in my definition, in this definition, okay, yeah. Let me go back to my text. So in my definition of education planning, I make reference to data, to common sense, to logics, and of course, to decision making. So the core idea is the coming up of programs specific to education. It is about coming up with programs to facilitate the provision of education. So the basis of achieving this fundamental right is therefore data, information, knowledge. So at the very outset of this process, we are faced with some critical questions. So what is it that we want to plan for? What are the current state? Where do we want to go or to reach? What resources do we have? How do we get there? How do I know I've got there? So all these questions requires data, information to be answered, and to be able to formulate a plan. So planning is a core process to achieving education goals. Education is dynamic, complex, and multifaceted. And I believe you all know that. So our overarching goals to make it accessible, relevant, and worthwhile, and our ultimate vision to keep it as a fundamental human rights, probably the most critical rights, along with the right to life, requires that planning be the core activity in this pursuit. So we need to plan in order to keep education a fundamental right. So the question now is, how
planning is viewed, oriented, and executed depends on the philosophy a system espouses, the control it has on the provision of education, and to a lesser extent, its decision-making culture. So some systems favor a centralized planning approach, while others favor less directive and more participatory approaches. So in making my argument in favor of education planning, I am of the opinion that even if the level of education development of a country depends on its wealth, a sound political and social structure must be in place, as education development does not automatically follow from economical development. So the process is very much a consequence of the effort devoted to this task of organizing the resources, organizing the wealth. So this justifies the merit of diligent educational planning. So specific to the Seychelles context, I can say that education planning has evolved from a more authoritative, politically motivated approach to one which is more participatory and evidence-based. Moreover, the nature of the planning processes have been very much dictated by the nature of the reform or the program being planned. Let me give you some cases at different period of time. For instance, during the period 1977 to 1993 era, which we refer to in Seychelles as the Second Republic, the country was a single-party state, relatively authoritarian philosophy. Much of its decision to reform education was planned using a controlled, dictated approach. For instance, the move to ban private school was very much socio-politically motivated. Through a strong element, a strong element of planning might have taken place to reorganize schooling, the process was not overt nor participatory. So from 1993 onwards, the country began to enjoy some more participatory cases of education planning. For instance, the school improvement project implemented in school in 1995 was participatory, data-driven, and evolved into a bottom-up approach to improving school. So we began to see the emergence of action research in school, which is another form of collaborative approach to educational planning and improvement. So the SIP model advocated an objective planning model, which saw the school management team meeting together to establish school objectives and priority as a basis of the development plan. Yeah. So in 2000, the Seychelles approach to improving school was widely acclaimed by the Commonwealth countries. The SACMEC study in 2000, led by IIEP, brought a massive twist in the planning conversation. We began to enjoy a formal approach to policy formulation. The SACMEC data allowed us to review our classroom streaming policy. We got data to discuss about school zoning policy and data to drive a major mathematics improvement initiative. So this year, for example, we have been using a participatory approach to plan and design our TVET model and our inclusive education policy, a collaborative participatory approach to curriculum processes, planning, design, implementation, and evaluation. So in this collaborative participatory approach to planning, we form working groups consisting of teachers, school leaders, parent participations, and of course, expert in certain cases, students. So to plan, implement, and evaluate projects. Now, let me perhaps talk about the challenges before I conclude. So our main challenge is our size. We are a very small country. We are small but complex, very complex. So a watch is just a small clock. So whatever a big clock needs to operate, a watch also needs the very same mechanism. So we are yet to build a generation of educational researchers in the Seychelles where people are sensitive to data and subsequently lessen their dependence on philosophical instinct when it comes to educational change. We are yet to make progress within the data management area. Very few people want to become statistician or works in statistics. Additionally, we are yet to secure an effective MS platform. Since data are critical in educational planning, I can say that our data are few and in some cases disorganized. So the political landscape has significantly changed, of course, which has now created more space for more engagement. Call from UNESCO, for instance, to give teachers and students more say in educational planning is to a lesser extent creating panic within certain camps. Not everybody understands how to create a space for non-specialists, for students to engage meaningfully. So the way forward, not only do we need the right tools or resources, but we need a generation of researchers, a generation of planners who believes in critical thinking and who are responsive to the dynamics of education, the dynamics of the world. We need a generation of planners who have the ability to collect the required information and organize the available resources, which will ultimately bring about worthwhile change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. And now let me pass the floor to Her Excellency Awud Den Akul, who is online virtually. Thank you very much again, Madam, for agreeing to be with us today. So I stay here. Let me tell you that Her Excellency is the first female Minister of General Education and Instruction for South Sudan. She was appointed in March 2020. Her Excellency, could you switch on your camera? Welcome, Her Excellency. Unmute. Could you unmute? Her Excellency. No.
Can you see me?
Yes. Thank you very much for being with us.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, thank you very much for this opportunity to share my remark with you. I had 3 questions and a recommendation. And in the beginning, I would like to apologize to UNESCO and my colleagues, the ministers, for not being able to attend this important symposium in person. I hope that I will have the opportunity to participate in person in the future. I must acknowledge the significance of International Institute for Education Planning, UNESCO's 60th anniversary, and the crucial role it's played in education planning and management. I also want to underscore the importance of Symposium as a platform to reflect on the past achievement and chart a path forward for education planning. As a minister responsible for basic education in South Sudan, my role in advocating for education planning in today's world is significant. Educational planning is a fundamental pillar for the development of countries, especially in a rapid changing world. It is the cornerstone of building prosperous and equitable societies. It serves as a guiding compass to ensure four things. One, alignment of education with a national development objectives. Educational planning enables us to align our education system with our broader development objectives. By setting clear targets, strategies, and we can ensure that education contributes to economic growth, social equity, and overall national progress. Two, resource optimization. Educational planning allows us to allocate resources efficiently, ensuring that every investment in education yields the greatest impact. This is crucial in a resource-constrained environment like South Sudan. Three, quality education for all is not just a moral imperative, but economic necessity. Education planning is key to ensure that every individual, regardless of background, has access to quality education. It helps identify marginalized groups and ensure that no one is left behind in the pursuit of knowledge and skill. For education fostering critical thinking and social cohesion, making it essential for sustainable development in any society. Educational planning has evolved significantly over the years, from crisis-driven to more proactive long-term approach. We have shifted from a traditional centralized to modern appreciate decentralization and inclusivity. When decentralization, we have moved from a centralized planning model to decentralized planning, allowing greater participation of subnational entities, states, and administrative areas, while also encouraging the states and administrative areas to involve counties, local communities, and educators in decision-making process. Inclusive education. South Sudan has made effort to promote inclusive education by accommodating students with disabilities and creating opportunities for girls' education, ensuring a more equitable system. And three, technology integration. In response to the digital age, we have started integrating technology into educational planning. This includes leveraging technology to generate quick data to support decision-making. Example, education census. Technology has also been a game changer in reaching the remote communities through radio programs. What are our challenges? Challenges faced by educational planners today are multifaceted, including one, social, demographic, and economic challenges. Growing populations amid resources constraint, political instability, rising from unclaimed demographic dividends, and social inequalities. 2, security concern, conflict-related disruption, and the imperative to leave no one behind remain significant hurdles for planners globally, and especially for the case of South Sudan. 3, the recent COVID-19 pandemic magnifies these challenges, highlighting the need for adaptable and resilient planning. Where our recommendation are: 1, promote international cooperation and knowledge sharing. Education is a global concern, and cross-border collaboration can offer valuable insight and support. 2, embrace technology and innovation. The digital revolution has demonstrated the power of technology in education. Future planning should incorporate digital solution at system and incorporate digital solution at system and delivery level for quick turnaround to administrative needs and flexibility, accessible learning. 3, prioritize inclusivity and diversity. Education should reflect and respect diversity of the society. Prioritizing diversity, peace, and stability can create a conducive environment for educational planning and implementation. 4, strengthens an emergency preparedness and resilience. And we have seen how many floods hits our country for the last 4 years, where our schools are in floods and most of our students are displaced. Educational planning should be adaptable to crisis and resilient in the face of unexpected challenges. Contingency plans are crucial to maintaining education in emergencies. 5, empowering communities and parents. Engaging parents and communities in the planning process ensure that education is aligned with the local needs and values. In conclusion, Excellencies, educational planning remain an indispensable tool for countries aspiring to build a brighter future. The experience of South Sudan demonstrates the challenges and opportunities in our journey. By embracing innovation, inclusivity, and a spirit of collaboration, we can overcome these challenges and pave a way forward for a more prosperous and equitable education future, not only in South Sudan, but any country that dares to dream. I thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now, let me now pass the floor to His Excellency Romy Om, who is Secretary of State from the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport of Cambodia.
Oui, tout d'abord, je crois que
First of all, I would like to say a few words in French, but I will speak in English. It's the first time that I'm here before you, and I'm presenting on behalf of the Cambodian group, and we also have the alumni who've participated in the IIEP training program in France. I think it's really important that we say how important information from our ministry is. We've actually talked about all this during the meeting that was held in Manila. I think this was 2 weeks ago. And I also would like to share the history of Cambodia with you. I'm thinking of everyone who's here, and some of you might be asking, where's Cambodia and why is a Cambodian speaking French? You might wonder, Cambodia is a small country that is a part of the Asian community. It's East Timor that also is a part of this community. Cambodia's population was almost 17 million. It's not much, but this is a developing country and is fast growing development. It's fast track development. So it's really important for me to share the keys in order to provide better information within the Ministry of Education. And I'm going to now speak in English.
So very good morning. And thank you for inviting me to speak on my important for the planning in today's world. Especially today, I would like to emphasize the critical role of the education, planning and shaping for the future of our society and the empowerment of the individuals to strive in the ever change of the world. In today's, the fast-paced and the complex world, where the challenges and the uncertainty abounds, the planning is more crucial than ever. It is to provide us with the necessary tool to navigate through uncertainty, set the clear goal, and chart a course towards a better future. Education planning especially play the fundamental role in the better future. Education planning also transforming our education system to meet the need of the learner, prepare them for the challenges of the 21st century, and to contribute to national development. Here in Cambodia, we have recognized the significance of the education planning through the development and implementation of the Cambodia Education Strategy Plan, so-called ESP. The ESP serves as our compass guiding the transformation of our education system in aligning it with our national vision and the goals. Cambodia aspires to take its national prize to new heights, building strong, vital, glorious, and prosperous the nation toward in high-income country by 2050. To achieve this, and prosperous nation toward in high by the income country, to achieve this vision, we need to qualify, digitalize, and resilient human resources. The ESP also provided the place a high priority on providing equitable access to the quality education and effectiveness leadership and management of education staff at all levels, with the ultimate goal of the creative, quality, digitalized, and resilient human resources. The ESP also the outline as the comprehensive framework that sets clear outcome goal, objective, strategy, and major target and indicator across the 7 sub-sectors. Its primary focus is to ensure the universal access to education across all levels, from early childhood education to primary and secondary school, and to provide opportunities for the continued learning at high level. The goal is to build a strong and regionally competitive education system for the knowledge-based society. The ASP also envision a well-resourced, well-governed and well-balanced education system with equity, inclusion, efficiency, and high-quality standard as its core principle. Inclusivity and equity are core principles embedded within the ESP. We recognize that every student, regardless of the background of or circumstances, deserves equal opportunity to learn and succeed. The ESP also especially addresses the barrier to access and participation for the marginalized group, such as the children with disability, those from low-income background, or ethnic minority. To realize the implementation of the ESP, we have established synergies and linkages between the budget strategy plan, so-called BSP, and the education strategy plan of the Provincial Office of Education and the annual operation plan. These coordinate efforts ensure that resources are allocated strategically and that the political are effective implemented. The COVID-19 pandemic also has underscored the critical of education planning in the establishment of the resilient education system. By the way, the ESP has already outlined the strategy for the integrating digital technology into the teaching and learning prior to the pandemic. Consequently, when schools were forced to close in 2020 due to the outbreaks, educational staff were able to quickly adapt the teaching method to online learning modalities and utilize various online resources to deliver instructional content. The education emphasizes, especially at the secondary education level, this including the updating the system, the STEM curriculum, and including the developing the STEM teaching and the learning material, providing professional development for the STEM teacher, and fully implementing the STEM curriculum at the new generation school. Effective resource allocation is a crucial aspect of the education planning. The ASP also enables us to identify the priority and allocate the resource strategically to achieve our goal. And the ASP also play the role to advocate for the increased funding for educational from the government, the development play partner, and the other relevant stakeholder to ensure the Ministry of Economic and Finance allocated the budget for the education sector. And based on the educational result and the performance set in the ESP. By the way, the development of the partner and the global partner like a GPE, providing the grant based on the goal and the strategy set in the ESP. Yes, thank you. I will try my best. The ESP also the foster cooperation and stakeholder engagement, and we also recognize this that the address of the complex challenge of education require the collective effort. The other one is while education planning offers significant benefit, we also acknowledge the challenge faced by educational planner in implementing efforts the strategy plan. About the challenge, when we planning the policy, we cannot be avoid the challenge, but challenge can be the good point that we can also learning from the feedback, learning from the reality, the situation. So the firstly, we must also strengthen the collaboration and the partnership with the civil society, the organization and the private sector, and finally the teacher union, local authority, and the community. Also, we must also conduct the comprehensive review of the existing education policy to ensure the alignment and the coherence among the different policy and the strategy. And also we need to invest also in capacity building program for education planner. This also including the providing training and evidence of the informed planning for the simulation model, etc. By the way, we also recognizing the need for the robust monitoring and evaluation for the framework. And the current framework should be based on the reliable and the time data, focusing on the output. Last but not least, education planning is one of the paramount important in shaping the future of our society. And through of this strategic plan, we also can create inclusive, the equitable, and the resilient education system that empower the individual to thrive rapidly change of the world. By setting clear the goal, engaging the stakeholder, allocating the resources strategical, and fostering collaboration, that we can build a strong foundation for the quality education and contribute to the national development. And let us work together with the IIEP and especially the UNESCO that who always support and back up Cambodia development. Thank you, Mike, for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Its Excellency. Thank you to all the ministries and Secretary of State for helping us to set in the scene of this important symposium on importance of planning. I had one idea of each one of the presentation. I mean, there are several ideas, but I want to share one of them, and then on the coffee we can continue the conversation. I think it's very important what the Ministry of Costa Rica says about the importance of leadership for developing plans that are contextualized to the specific needs of the countries. That's very important. And then from the Ministry of Seychelles, he emphasized the importance of research and the human capital development, especially for building data and good evidence for supporting the plannings. From the Ministry of South Sudan, the importance of the participatory efforts for addressing the very complex challenges they have in South Sudan. And finally, from the Secretary of State, he addressed the importance of the ESP as a coordinated effort for long-term policies in Cambodia, and how that was interesting. And I think it's something that we can learn more about, how they were able to adapt the ESP to the emerging needs coming from the pandemic. So thank you very much. I think we are ready for a coffee now, and then we will come back for the next part of the meeting. Rob,
thank you. Just before we go, please let me, we will restart at 11:30 sharp. So I will ring this bell. Oh, it's a bit better than that, actually. There we go. So when you hear that, please make your way back downstairs, leaving all food and hot drinks upstairs. We can't have them in the auditorium. Please also make use of the photo corner, which you may have seen when you entered, and you can share all of your photos on social media using the hashtag IIEP 60 years. That would be wonderful. So toilets are available on both floors, so make use of any of those, and see you at 11:30.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. For any opportunity now.
Sí, thank you. Luego tenemos la presentación Vamos a hacer el documento para la educación.
el primero que en verdad invita a este nuevo poder. No está escrito para los ministros, sino para que sea su mismo. La cultura educativa no va a cambiar a que usted hoy tiene que cambiar en cambio, ¿no? Yo voy a llevar a lo voy a mandar a que tiene lo que le puede hacer.
We are in a changing context where there are so many dimensions going on at the same time that are leading us to change. I mean, it's change in diversity and inequality, change in health, change in environmental contexts that are really influencing our education systems, change in technology, change in globalization and conflicts, and all of this is leading to change. I mean, we are in a moment of high levels of change, and this is leading to uncertainty as well. And so, as we know, these elements have both an impact on our education systems, but our education systems also can shape them. So it's very important for us to integrate that in the planning process. And so in the past, planning and education policy making in general has been very linear. The thinking about it is very theoretical. And so we diagnose the system, we assess it, we diagnose it, we try to find out what is the problem. Then we define the priorities, we set the agendas, then we define the policy options, and we develop the policies, we implement them, and we evaluate them, and we start again. And this is the theory. But in practice, this is really not what it's all about. It's all about people, timing, politics, as the director was reflecting on us. It's the reality of short-term with long-term combined together, and it's very complex. And so this is very important for planners, because while you have to have a long-term vision for planning, you really need to take into consideration so many new factors that are coming through, which are, first of all, the policy design process, as we think about it in a linear way, need to integrate stakeholders, new stakeholders, students, principals, parents, everybody involved in education needs to be included in the design process. And so this requires a lot of human relationships and knowing how to lead these processes. And it requires taking on board complexity in terms of uncertainty, of crisis, or everything around that's happening around the education system influences it. So it's very important to include that as well. So what happens is that the planning process, while it's a very theoretical exercise, it is also a very real exercise that integrates this. And so we are now moving to a new global campus. And for us, what's very important is that the training that we develop recognizes these new types of skills that planners require to take hold of uncertainty of these new planning processes. So we are in the process of finalizing a new competency framework for education planners and managers. And it recognizes that it's not only knowledge that is required to be a planner, but there's actually this new or ongoing types of soft skills that are very, very important. Those are not only technical, but strategic and leadership skills that are required to be effective in the planning process so that it reaches implementation. We've grouped them into data management and skills, policy plan program implementation, and a range of technical skills, monitoring and evaluation. But we also talk about collaboration, communication, flexibility and adaptability, leadership and management, and strategic thinking. So in our new global campus, we will be integrating this into our training starting from next year. And this is quite important. And I think for us, it's the experience of our prominent alumni who are here to share with us, their experience in planning and also how our training has helped them in their planning. So without further ado, we have the first question that we're going to ask our three panelists. And in the context of SDG 4 targets, in which ways has planning contributed to education improvement in your country? So Neva, please, if you can to the floor.
Good morning and perhaps good afternoon and good evening to those of you who are joining us online. As an IIEP alum, and it's a tremendous honor to be able to participate in the 60th anniversary celebrations of the Institute. And having had the privilege to work in education planning in St. Kitts and Nevis and now the broader Caribbean, I'm excited to bring to this panel not only my views, but also the insights from the regional network of Caribbean education planners who are really working to strengthen education planning across the Caribbean. So in this brief presentation, what I hope to do is share a little bit about how education planning has contributed to sector development in St. Kitts and Nevis. I will also touch on how education planning across the broader Caribbean has been influenced by SDG 4. Then I'm going to share a little bit about the challenges that we see in the region in terms of measuring SDG 4, and also some of the mechanisms that have been put in place to try to overcome some of these challenges. Not my slide.
The next.
Not my slide either.
The next. I didn't.
Okay. Okay, great. So I assumed responsibility for education planning in St. Kitts and Nevis in 2015, which is the year the SDGs 4 were globally agreed. And with the skills that I honed at IIEP with a tremendous investment from the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, I was able to lead the Ministry of Education in the development of an education sector plan from 2017 to 2021, which in line with SDG 4 really focuses on lifelong learning, quality, and equity. And I think in terms of sector improvements, there are two examples that I'd like to share with you. First, although universal secondary education has been a cornerstone of the education system in St. Kitts and Nevis for decades, retention at the upper secondary level has been a challenge, largely because students in the lowest academic streams, who are disproportionately male, were conditioned to leave secondary school before the last year of the cycle, which is when students typically take the regionally administered secondary level competence exams. So through our ESP, the Ministry of Education introduced the policy that all students remain in secondary school through the final year, effectively abolishing what we had as a school leaving group. This policy, which was bolstered by increased social and academic support, really led to a significant decrease in the dropout rate at the upper secondary level. We saw increased retention and also increased parity and gender parity, I should say, in participation. Second, with a focus on learning, the National Curriculum and Assessment System is also being improved through our ESP to ensure that teaching and learning is student-centered, that it's competency-focused, and that it is inclusive. Our enhanced curriculum is currently being piloted at the primary and the lower secondary levels and has broadened core learning areas and has also instigated institutional reforms to ensure that all classes are mixed ability. I think this latter change has really required an increased focus on differentiated instruction and also on formative assessment. So we see that these instructional strategies have really undergirded much of the professional development over the past 5 years in our country. Our enhanced curriculum and assessment system is expected to improve learning outcomes for all, but particularly and historically for those who have performed below average. So we expect some valuable data on sector performance and student performance from the new national assessment process, which is being implemented shortly. And we expect that the data from that will help with future curriculum reform and also with continued professional development. I have to learn how to use this a little bit better. Got it. So to shift focus a little bit to the wider Caribbean, SDG 4 has really provided a goalpost for the development and implementation of contextually relevant strategies. The CARICOM Human Resource Development Strategy till 2030, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Sector Strategy to 2026, and national education plans across the region demonstrate alignment to SDG 4, not only in terms of the policy priorities, but also in terms of the indicators that have been selected to measure plan progress. And I think, as we can see from the quotes on the screen, planners across the region really confirm the relevance of SDG 4 to education planning. However, in terms of challenges, although we see plenty of SDG 4 aligned interventions, as we can see on the heat map, measuring progress towards SDG 4 has been a challenge across the Caribbean. And really, this is due in large part to data and governance and monitoring and evaluation constraints that have hindered the availability of data, and I would say particularly for equity, lifelong learning, and quality indicators. There is good news. There's widespread political support across the region to improve the measurement of education goals, both local and global. We have the CARICOM Ministers of Education that have committed to improving data governance by 2020-24. And we also have at the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, a recently instituted Regional Data Governance Council to improve data management and dissemination. I also want to highlight that critically translating these political commitments into action is our regional network of Caribbean education planners, who among other things are really trying to strengthen our education management information systems. Many countries, including St. Kitts and Nevis, have adopted Open EMIS to measure plan performance and alignment with SDG 4. And we also see across the region a proliferation of the use of various learning management systems. So to conclude, I just hope that this brief presentation has given you a little bit of an insight into some of the strengths and challenges in sector planning towards SDG 4 in the region. And I really look forward to the discussions with the panel and the event participants over the next 2 days on how we can use education planning to achieve SDG 4, but also to continue to drive transformation at the local level, tethered to needs and priorities. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We now invite Mr. Sote Alim, please.
Very good morning, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to listen to our experience, how important of educational planning for the global and also the country level. So in the context of SDG 4 target, Cameroon localize it and develop kind of education roadmap 2030. We take into consideration the target of the global, and also we also need to balance to the priority of the country as well. So this is important, and also from there for the roadmap 2030, we manage kind of 5-year education strategy plan, which respond to the benchmark already clearly stated in the roadmap 2030. So in terms of development of the plan, we use kind of simulation model, which adapt from the IIEP, and we call it a CANPRO model, Cameroon Analysis Projection Model, and also we develop kind of educational management information system to make sure that the data are available for planning and also monitoring and evaluation of the progress of the SDG 4 implementation, FAA, National Education Strategy Development Plan. So what are the challenges? Our main challenges is how can we align the global agenda with the national priority? Because in global agenda is more focused on quality, inclusive, equality, and lifelong learning, whereas country priority is more focus on STEM technology and so on. So this is our challenge. And so what are the impact of educational planning in Cambodia? You know, from SDG 4 roadmap, we managed to develop kind of ESP, which identify program and strategy that aim at learning improvement. So it's we try to see how the planning can contribute to student learning is very difficult, but we all believe that we have to have good planning at the start of the country education development. And the planning is kind of increasing sector-wide approach where DP development partner align with the government, and ESP a sector plan and can also tool to mobilize resources from the different stakeholders. And simulation can really help to discuss on what we can, what we can, and what we want and what we can do. So it's kind of our planning with the investment available that we can do, and what are the budget gap that we can mobilize from other stakeholders. So, and also planning has been decentralized, the concentration to provincial and district level, and be translated to the improvement of the school and district level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sotea. We now invite Bonaventure. He's going to speak in French. So if you need your headphones, please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. It is both a thrill and an honor for me to be here and to take the floor. As a former, as an alumni here, I think I'm well suited to talk about planning, but I feel that the quality of people sitting in front of me is such that I would shy away from giving lessons. What I would like to do, however, is to testify and to share my experience from the education planning in Burkina Faso. What I would like to say first is that based on what I saw, we have been talking a lot about planning, but planning has always been there, both formally and informally. We have all known times when planning was an issue. What we have seen in Burkina Faso is that this process was heavily influenced by international agendas, as you are very much aware. A lot is being said about sustainable development goals, but there are other agendas, both continental strategies on education under the auspices of the African Union, etc. There are two main periods in Burkina Faso. This is the reason why I wondered whether the 2000s should be considered as the golden age of planning in our countries, because this is when the basic educational planning was kickstarted. In the 1990s, the International Education Forum that took place in Dakar concluded that the education for all goals had not been reached. This is the reason why the world education community decided to renew its commitments for education for all. One of the important decisions that was made in Dakar was that for developing countries that had credible educational planning could benefit from donors' support in order to carry out such plans, and to create and develop proper educational systems. The question remains, what is credible? So in Burkina Faso, this translated into a foray into educational planning. As you know, we have a wide array of different departments that are in charge of education and training. Within each ministerial department, there are different services, and there is a very heavy influence of a number of trends, and therefore strategic documents tended to be manifold. Look at girls' education, which was a key issue in our country. There was a strategy that was developed in order to strengthen education of girls. There is a national girl education, but there are also other themes such as schools, canteens. There are other strategies that are being developed. And the problem is that we end up with a wide array of different strategies that tend to go in all directions. How can we better ensure that all of those strategies are in line with one another? How can we make sure that they're in line with the main targets that we set for ourselves at the country level? And this is something that is a main challenge in Burkina Faso. Another thing that I should mention is that we need to comply with international agendas, international commitments, and that is not always easy. A number of objectives, number of targets are set globally, but the problem is that countries are not exactly playing in the same field. And sometimes this might translate into major challenges, major hurdles for countries. Another issue, another challenge that we're faced with is how to better assess progress towards the achievement of such targets. I know that EMIS is supposed to help in order to better understand where we are standing at towards progress, towards achieving the targets that we have, but things are not always that easy, especially when faced with climate change, with the need to take into account social-emotional skills that are very difficult to assess. So, as a conclusion, either way, nothing can replace planning. Planning is at the very heart of reforms, it's at the very heart of development, including when it comes to education. However, we need to streamline our efforts in order to improve our efficiency. Thank you very much. I would like to very quickly talk about our experience from the past couple of years. Our experience has changed due to a community decision that was made to adopt what we call a budget program. What does it mean? Each ministerial department's budget is cut into different budget lines, and each is given to one specific service and one specific lead. The lead will act based on the budget that they have, and they will develop an annual performance budget, and they will be assessed at the end of each year in order to better monitor their performance. This is something that took place in 2019, and that has had a huge impact on how we work. Now, I was asked whether education planning changed anything in Burkina Faso educational system. The answer is yes, and I would like to use this graph as an example, as a mere example. Here you can see how attendance evolved over one specific period. Here you have before the 2000s, and then you have another period starting from the 2000s. You can see here that at the moment we started to develop and to implement the education development plan, the best increase in attendance was evidenced by data. This doesn't necessarily mean here that the number of students have decreased, but it means that the increase did not happen at the same speed as when compared with 2010 and afterwards. There has been a number of possible explanations for this. It took us about 2 years to go from the first to the second plan. You know that there has been a number of initiatives that were taken right from the start, which helped enroll a very large number of students. And of course, this translated into a decrease in the improvements. So what use was it for us? Well, it helped increase and improve our dialogue within our networks. Every stakeholder in Burkina Faso can use this plan in order to discuss, to carry out, as I said, strategic plans, roadmaps, and this is a great way for us to foster dialogue, to foster debate. It was also a great way to bring together the whole community, ranging from all stakeholders to funders, donors, etc. I think as a conclusion, I'd like to say that we need to make sure that we involve everyone in order to pull together expertise, experiences, to identify the most relevant actions and make sure that we'll identify the best actions to improve educational systems. So, as a conclusion, I would like to talk about funding.
So this set of tools is actually the base for a national discussion. And it means also more accountability. So with our financial partners, we've set up a number of tools to earmark budgets. And there is a financing protocol that was laid down with the various stakeholders, financial contributors, and so on. And on this basis, partners account for resources on a regular basis. And also, it means that there is more alignment of partners on the priorities of the educational system. So this was quite an interesting experience. Over the last few years, there were a number of crises taking place, and this is a tool that we are not fully using, but we still have it. There's a number of partners that could not fully leverage those tools, but the tool is around, the tool is being used on a number of platforms. Now, I would also like to say that with this approach, we can increase the results-based management system, and all stakeholders were appreciative of this. There is a board where all stakeholders take place, and within that board, we decide on what priorities should be acted upon to set up this alternative system. And then at the end of the day, there's a report drafted, and stakeholders are involved. So this is a process that emphasizes data-driven processes and also the accountability culture, because a number of resources are used and we have to be made accountable for that. Furthermore, by and large, I would say this: the fact that we have a systematic planning approach regarding the availability of tools with a dialogue, with a change in the governance of the sector, that was the end result. We have a change, and there's a constant dialogue, a permanent dialogue with the stakeholders. This meeting takes place every 2 months, and there are theme-based workshops that follow up progress, improvement, and set out the specifics for each group. And then there is an assessment of performance at the end of the process. So all of this is part of this dynamic, systematic planning approach. Thanks to this, we have a tool where we build up a dialogue that helps improve the overall situation. That's what I had to say. Thank you for listening.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bonaventure.
You can see the 3 alumni the role that they have played in education planning and how well they know their system and the impact that this has had on their whole education system and the improvement. So now we want to learn about their training at IIEP and how this has influenced their practice. So I wanted to ask the three of them how IIEP's training has had an impact in your own practice as an education planner. Thank you.
IIEP, is this working? Okay, great. IIEP training has been absolutely integral to my career as an education planner. I would say that the flagship ATP, the Advanced Training Program, which is incredibly practical in its orientation, really allowed me to rehearse the key technical and policy processes that I apply in my everyday work. So for example, technical skills such as stakeholder mapping, education sector analysis, program development, and monitoring and evaluation helped me to lead the Ministry of Education in the development of a credible education sector plan. And these foundational skills also really helped me in my day-to-day work as an education planner across the Caribbean, having supported many ministries of education in the development and appraisal of education sector plans. I think also, though, from a policy lens, the training here at IIEP really helped me to confidently and strategically engage with decision makers in ministries of education, ministries of finance, and with development partners. In fact, if I can just share a quick little story, one unforgettable IIEP training experience, which took place in this very room, was when we had to defend our mock education sector plan to the then head of technical cooperation, Dr. Anton de Graaf. And Dr. de Graaf really challenged us to defend our policy priorities with evidence. He really challenged us to explain the political and the financial implications of plan components and to demonstrate the feasibility of plan implementation. I remember reflecting after the course how incredibly challenging that activity was, but I also knew that it was absolutely important to my professional toolbox. There's been numerous experiences since that date where I've had to either clarify or defend plan components. And I would say thanks to the IIEP training, I've always been very well prepared. I also think our planners across the region have testified to the expertise and confidence that they bring to their work as a result of IIEP training. For example, they have listed and shared with me the fundamentals of education planning, using learning assessment data to monitor SDG 4, mainstreaming early childhood education and planning, and secondary teacher management as some of the important short courses. So I know we heard reference of the global campus that's forthcoming. And I think given the extensive range of courses that IIEP can now make accessible to education professionals, it's going to be a great testament not only to our own professional development, but by extension, the education systems and societies that we serve.
Merci, vous m'entendez?
Thank you. Can you hear me? I would like to say this. I, for one, I've known two periods. I worked in a planning department before coming for training. And so it enables us to measure the headway that we've made in terms of acquiring knowledge and skills on education planning. Now, this is the most critical thing as far as I'm concerned. This training enables us to acquire planning skills in other neighboring areas. But on top of that, it gives you confidence. And you know that confidence is basic to the success of all your endeavors. I remember that back in 2014, we had to make choices in terms of specialization, and I was fearful of some modules. So I went to see Miss Patricia to ask her for advice because I was anxious. I was hesitant in terms of tackling the simulation model. So she encouraged me and she gave me good advice. What do I mean? As I said earlier, back in 2015, I received a proposal to become Director for Statistics and to coordinate the production and the dissemination of statistical data within the ministry. I was hesitant, and I must admit that I would not have accepted that proposal had I not gone through that training. But then I knew what it was about. I had the skills, and mostly I knew what the expectations were for me. So this shows that that training was very beneficial in personal terms. But on top of that, the fact that you have skills, competencies, a framework in a work environment covers the whole organization. Since 2014, I've taken up a number of strategic posts within the ministry. Before I became statistical manager, I was also strategy management director, and currently I'm permanent secretary in charge of coordinating all what relates to education planning and also the mobilization of financial resources. Let me give you two examples. I led the overhaul of the ministry with the AFD backing and so on. And so this way I learned how you can support and move forward this information system. Let me give you a second example. I am the focus for the Burkina Faso GPE work. And so we ask for funding from the GPE, and we know that it has a lot of impact on planning, on cooperation, dialogue, and so on. So I'm able to do this book easily. I'm not anxious anymore. I'm trying to be modest, obviously, because this is teamwork. And we are in connection with our partner, the GPE, but I believe that the fact that I went through that training enables me to find a way out, to manage this. So the point is that it enables you to have a clear vision of where you want to be and to be able to set out a momentum with your team. And so this is necessary to have a clear view of the results you expect. By and large, we also have the experience of some consultants and support. I know that in some countries, consultants would draft the whole programs for beneficiaries. Nowadays, this is a thing of the past in Burkina Faso because we have a critical mass of people who were trained. We have seniors and we have up-and-coming people, and this enables us to go down the avenue we want with the support that we require from technical experts. So by and large, this is what I had to say to make the point that this training is very beneficial personally and also beneficial to the ministry divisions. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Please, Mr. Sonia.
Thank you very much for invitation to be here. I'm graduate from IIP in 2007. It takes 14 years and come back and tell you how experiences we apply in our working place. And I really appreciate the course provided by IIP, which is really professional development. And many Cameroon people who graduate from here. And the course is not only provide a theoretical understanding, but given opportunity to learn from each other among the participants from different countries, different context and experiences. And also we have alumni, we have further communicate, we still keep contact with IIP experts so that we can improve our educational planning preparation. For me, in the working place, I can be able to lead the preparation of the education sector plan, and of course we still work with other stakeholders to make sure that the quality of the plan is there, and we are able to talk with the other technical department, logical start from analysis, problem identification, and strategic formulation, and projection, and budget costing for 5 years of the plan. The whole plan is something like that, and also to train our people working at the subnational level to understand the planning, and to teach them to train them how to make their own plan, you know. And more importantly, we can work with the development partners, myself used to be the IDG, GPE, focal point. So from this background, from this knowledge, we really work well with the partners, and also IDG for coordinator, we are very good to work with, to talk with the same language with the partner. So it is thing, and also to convince the leader how the planning is important, and from the problem identification, and what are the priority, what are investment for the next 5-year plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this is, this testament from the 3 alumni on the power of IIEP's training is a testament to you as students, but also to many of you who work at IIEP, who take a lot of effort and take a lot of extra time to invest in training. And I just see many of the trainers here, and I think it makes us proud. And you come here and you share, it's like family in a way. You're coming, hello, can I say hello to Mama D? And can I say, so we're quite proud to have contributed to your development as well. And we want to continue this. And I think we've now heard from the present, from the past, and how it's influenced you. And now we want to hear about the future. And what do you think? Maybe we can start with Sotea. What do you think about the future of education planning, and how is it changing? I don't know if you want to start, or we should. So
I think the mic is closest to you.
Okay. So please.
I think it's what we have been learning for last 15 years might not be able to deal with the current situation. So I think we have to adapt our work, our planning according to the situation. The COVID-19 teaches us a lot. So planning should be flexible, should be can be amended, and can be easily reviewed. And this is an important thing that we would like to look into, in. And now for the IDG is different from the EFA, where EFA is looking more for the access. IDG is more quality and inclusive is thing. So the planning should focus more on quality education, and should be sound decentralization, and also use ICT for education, and should be more focused on result-based planning. Is what I can see from the practical perspective, and how we can adapt our planning approach, preparation for the changing order situation in global and national. Thank you.
Bonaventure, please.
Thank you. I believe that to ask this question about the future of planning is a good thing. we are facing a number of wars, a number of crises, terrorism, a rise in violent extremism. So we should ask, how can we adjust the planning? So this is a very specific and difficult context, and we should adjust to this change in the context. I took a number of concrete examples. We started a 10-year planning and development. We're currently looking at 10-year plans. And apparently the microphone of the gentleman is not on. So he's speaking from into a microphone which is 2 or 3 yards away from him. You should ask him to turn his microphone on, please. So switch off the lady's microphone, and turn on the gentleman's microphone. And the lady should. Turn off the lady's microphone as well, please. I was just saying that in view of the situation, we have to adjust to a different environment. We should be more flexible. We cannot plan as we used to. Let me give you an example. In Burkina Faso, when you plan to set up a school with a given capacity in a village, but if there is a terrorist attack taking place, you should be in a position to make readjustments. And you should understand that some areas are inaccessible, and so you should move your resources to a different place. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to add classrooms, but to set up a temporary learning locations to enable internally displaced students to keep on being educated. So that's the sort of thing which is quite critical. I would also like to add one point. In this environment, we need to strengthen the participation of all stakeholders. Take government. They have their skills and their expertise. And then there are NGOs that have their own know-how, their own experience, not necessarily in the same country, but in other countries. And so where the state cannot intervene, it may be up to an NGO to come in order to meet that sort of emergency. So let me give you the example of Burkina Faso, but this applies to other countries as well. In an emergency, in a crisis environment, there are different types of stakeholders. There are development players, especially in education, and then you have humanitarian players, and you have peace promoters. There is no strict division between all those categories, as you probably know. If you take one ministry, which is based on development, focused on development, when there are students that are displaced, this is not just about development. Those students will require assistance, will require shelters, will require clothes, and so on. So nowadays, it is critical to strengthen the triple nexus. We should make it so that the players on the ground may display more synergy, that there be more concerted actions, so that all those players can talk to each other, can hammer out a common strategy, and be more efficient. One last point. Gender. This is not a new issue, but it is more complex nowadays than it used to be. Let's take the example of my country. At the end of May, in about one quarter of our schools are closed. One quarter of our schools are closed because of terrorist attacks. On the basis of the last census, we managed to show that about half students are outside of the education system. So those are kids in the street, in fields, in workshops, in urban developments. They can stay home because there are no resources for them, but also because of the weakness of the educational offering. So those are important issues. We mentioned SDGs, especially SDG 4, but in terms of planning, it is also critical to hammer out the right strategies to take on board all those differences. If we don't manage to reach those targets, we won't be able to meet SDG 4. That's what I had to say.
Neva, please.
Neva?
Great. I think, like we heard a lot this morning, education planning has always evolved, and I think must continue to evolve to meet the changing needs of our education systems and by extension, our societies and our countries. And I think this premise has really been inherent in IIEP's technical cooperation, its capacity building, and its support over the years. And so I think when we define the future of education planning, planners really need to just continue to ask themselves, how and why are the needs changing at local and global levels? I think when we approach our work from this critical lens, then we're much better able to devise the kind of contextually relevant strategies that can support system strengthening. Like the rest of the world, and perhaps I should say most of the rest of the world, the Caribbean region is dedicated to improving quality, to improving resilience, to improving equity. So I think that leaders in our region must be able to offer strategic leadership in the areas that the symposium is going to be interrogating. It will require that planners, practitioners, and administrators tool up, skill up in several areas. Of course, harnessing technologies, including generative AI, to support our education objectives. We have to be much more able to promote adaptable education and training systems that provide lifelong learning and, of course, skills for the future. I think we all recognize the importance of crisis-sensitive planning, as we just heard from my colleague, and also climate resilience in the sector is important. And last, but certainly not least, is the ability to better identify disparities in our systems and then come up with strategies to kind of optimize equity and inclusion. And I think if I could just build on that last point for 1 minute, as my professional standpoint as an education planner from the Caribbean, when I think about our regional thrust to create more equitable, inclusive education systems, I also think that planners can address a crucial question that is often unasked and therefore goes unanswered. And really, I think given our region's colonial history and the ways in which education systems have perpetuated unequal social and knowledge dynamics, I think for planners for whom this context is lived, we should be asking ourselves the question, how can education planning and management support the decolonization efforts of countries who have this as an objective for themselves? I think that this line of inquiry will really prompt us to interrogate the ways in which various colonial legacies continue to sustain and deepen inequality, and then allow us to better come up with the strategies to address these, whether it's at the classroom level, the school level, or the policy level. I think if we can foster collaboration around this theme amongst planners, then we'll be much better able to define the future of education planning for empowerment and for equity. It's certainly an area of inquiry that I find exciting and important, and I really hope that we can delve into this a little bit more tomorrow in the session on equity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the three of you. I think you've provided really a very important knowledge and have demonstrated the skills that you acquired here, but actually so much further than this. And I think we take note of your guidance on the future of planning and how we need to consider the long term and the short term, how to adapt planning to crisis situations, how to integrate technology, how to reflect very much planning on the local context and the needs of communities at the local level, at the national level in situations of inequality. I think this is at the heart as well of our own mandate in the coming future as well. So it's very important. I also wanted to we have actually more than 300 people online who are watching us, who are listening, and who are providing a lot of reflection and questions. Now we have, unfortunately, we don't have much time to respond to the questions, but maybe I can take just one or two very quickly. And there is one from Mukarai Nijia, which it's about how can we safeguard the continuity of long-term education planning in our nations when governmental transitions occur, protecting it from political interference. To me, this is a key issue, and I think it's the strength of planning. When you plan long-term, it's difficult when there's a transition for the plans to be halted. So this is something that you all three have lived through, and Bonaventura and I were speaking about this yesterday, actually. And so if you can share with us some reflection on how to work on the transition between governments and the planning efforts in your countries. Who would like to respond?
Sure. I mean, I think it's difficult, and we experience this in our countries all the time. I mean, in the Caribbean, we have like a five-year cycle mostly. And I think from my experience, the best thing that we can do, and we talked a lot about stakeholder participation, the best thing that we can do is we can ensure that all parties, whether it's the party in power or the party that's not in power, is involved in the policy setting exercise. Because what I've seen is that usually we can gain consensus around the high-level policy priorities, but it's the how that we implement, that's what sometimes changes. But if you can include all sides, decision makers at the highest level at those policy goals, then I think it's easier to pivot if there is a change in government.
This is a very relevant question, and I think I would like to say two things. Number one, planning itself. When faced with transition, there's a high level of uncertainty, but also parties want to do things differently, and this can have an impact on planning. Based on what I have seen for quite some time, and based on the fact that I come from a country that is experiencing transition as I speak, I feel that both in contexts of democratic or military transitions, there doesn't seem to be a substantial change when it comes to planning. When transition occurs, players want to make sure that they have results that they can claim ownership over. They want to be able to say, this is what we have done. And therefore, they tend to focus on a number of specific aspects. So yes, there is a level of disruption. This is undeniable, and this is a problem. But I feel that, generally speaking, the general trend remains. Number two, in the context of military transitions, there is an obvious negative impact on planning, since when you carry out a planning exercise, you do this based on both home and international resources that are available. Nevertheless, we all know that military transitions have an access on the availability of resources, and therefore you have to readjust your expectations. You are faced with a drop in available funding, and this has a negative impact on planning. These were the two things that I wanted to highlight.
Thank you. I think we should have kind of long-term planning so that we can think for 10 years, more than 10 years. So what we would like to be for education sector. And from there, we have to have midterm planning and short-term planning. So we can adjust midterm and short-term in the framework of the long-term planning. But although we have long-term planning, but we have to revisit in the mid-year of implementation. Let's say if we have 10-year planning, at the 5-year implementation, we have to review it. And also mobilize all concern or stakeholder in the planning process to make sure the planning is agreeable and acceptable among those who are involved. And of course, there need to have political commitment, and also the plan should be well aligned with the government priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now it's time for coffee, and I don't want to stop you. And for lunch, I'm sorry, it's even better. So I wanted to reflect on this survey, which actually demonstrates quantitatively, which we are about qualitative and quantitative data and information on the future of planning and what you reflect, and especially over to be with us. We excellent panel representing the world. Actually, we have Cambodia, Niger, we have Burkina Faso, and so it's a very exciting and panel that represents the world. And we want to thank you for your insightful knowledge, comments, and participation in the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you again to that panel for your very thoughtful and interesting contributions. Just a few things before we go to lunch. We would like to invite you to stay for the keynote speech after lunch, which opens our session on the future of planning. That will be from Fernando Reimers, so it would be great to see you there for that. If you can't stay with us, I would like to mention our shuttle bus service, which goes from the reception upstairs. This is running between IIEP and UNESCO headquarters for the General Conference. That will be leaving pretty soon, I would say. So if you could, 10 minutes time, so if you could meet us up by the reception if you'd like to make use of that. There is also a second one leaving here at the end of lunch if you'd like to stay for lunch. There is a limited capacity for that. And for those of you who have registered to join us for the Global Teacher Prize this evening at UNESCO headquarters, this special event takes place on the sidelines of the General Conference. Please remember to bring your ID, and it will take place in room 1 from 6:30 until 8 o'clock. Again, we will be traveling as a group over to UNESCO headquarters via public transport. So if you'd like to join us, please meet at reception at 6 o'clock. We'll be leaving at 6 o'clock, so maybe get there a bit early. We will now take a lunch break. See you back here at 1:30. And please note there are 3 different serving areas upstairs, so it might be quicker for you to not go to the first one, but to move to a different serving area. Enjoy your lunch. Buon appetito, buon provecho. One more thing, please, could you leave your headsets by the door, if possible, when you leave? Thank you very much.